Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 regular business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with council members Madrone and partially excused this evening. And with that, actually, I'll just announce that Councilmember Madrone actually is in Washington, D.C. On behalf of speaking of the city on lobbying for the Deschutes Estuary restoration project, and so she is there to represent us as a city in that regard, and we appreciate her service over there representing us. So with that, I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have an agenda. So first item this evening is item 2A, which is a proclamation recognizing the 40th anniversary of the Women's Olympic Trials. In reading that proclamation this evening is Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Whereas, on May 12, 1984, the City of Olympia, with the assistance of the greater Thurston County community, successfully hosted the event of the century, the first ever Women's Olympic Marathon Trials, which culminated in selecting the 3 winners to represent the United States in the historic first ever International Olympic Games Women's Marathon. And whereas, prior to this event, for 88 years, women marathoners were explicitly denied the opportunity to compete in the Olympic Games marathon event because of discriminatory views that women were unable to or should not compete in marathons, in spite of women frequently doing so throughout the world. And whereas a total of 238 outstanding, dedicated women marathoners from around the United States made history by competing in this event that began and ended at what is now known as Marathon Park. And whereas this event showcased community and regional pride and enthusiasm with participation from over 4,500 volunteers, the cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, Thurston County, St. Martin's College, Inner City Transit, state agencies, the local business community, hundreds of donors, running organizations, and more. And whereas Joan Benoit Samuelson placed first in the women's trials, and on August 5, 1984, in Los Angeles at the Olympic Games, Benoit Samuelson triumphed as the first women's marathon gold medalist in International Olympic Games history. And whereas 2024 marks the 40th anniversary of this historic event and is being celebrated with a reunion in Olympia at which Benoit Samuelson, fellow United States teammate Julie Brown, and more than 60 of the original 1984 competitors will be in attendance. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Olympia City Council does hereby proclaim the week of May 12, 2024 as the Historic Women's Olympic Marathon Trial Celebration Week in the City of Olympia, and encourage all community members to celebrate this significant monument in sports which advanced sports equity and inspired countless future generations of women to pursue excellence in athletics and other endeavors. Signed in the City of Olympia, Washington, this 14th day of May, 2024, Olympia City Council, Dante Payne, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So at this time, I'd like to invite up Denise Keegan, who is the 40th anniversary of the Women's Olympic Trials Committee member, to share a few words and receive the proclamation this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and we are very honored that you're willing to take the time out of your busy schedule to do this. When there was a woman in Seattle named Laurel James, who was a single mother of 5 boys, and it was her idea that Olympia could possibly host the trials. And she traveled to Olympia with her son, Brent, and met with the Capital City Marathon Association Committee. Now, retired Supreme Court Justice Gary Alexander, at the time, was a practicing attorney and was president of the Capital City Marathon. They approached him and the group and pitched the idea, and of course, a little overwhelming at first. And they said she had a lot of contacts national level, and she said, I'll walk you through it. And so they put this presentation together. They took a Douglas fir tree back on the plane, Doug fir. Olympia Beer was present, as was First Seafood, etc. And needless to say, of the hospitality rooms, when they flew to Philadelphia, and then Congressman Slade Gordon joined them. He was representing us. They met, gave their presentation. Needless to say, our hospitality room was the most popular because of the beer and the fish, etc. I don't know about Doug fir, but... And so they made their presentation, and at the end of the presentations, and after deliberation, the Olympia area was awarded the bid to host the first women's marathon trials. Now, New York City felt they were going to get it, and they were very upset. I think one of the headlines in the New York Times was something like Olympia versus the world, David versus Goliath. And there was a lot of grousing that Olympia couldn't pull it off, and making fun of Olympia. So there was an Olympic gold medalist named Frank Shorter, who had won the 1972 men's, he's the only American in the history of the modern Olympics to win the men's marathon, an American, only time. And he flew out here in 1983, ran the course. There's a photo of him receiving the torch from Gary Alexander here somewhere along the course. And when he finished running the race, this celebratory race the year before, he went to the national media and bragged about our area and how friendly we were and what a clean community this was and what a great course. So the bottom line is he changed the tide for the dialogue at the national level. And Frank Shorter, gold medalist Frank Shorter, will be here. And he is the only gold medalist to ever win the men's Olympic marathon. Frank Shorter is joining us. He's flying in tomorrow, and he will be here for our banquet on Friday night, as well as he'll be at the Running Expo on Saturday that we're hosting from noon to 5 at Sylvester Park during the Capital City Marathon during their CCMA Running Expo. So we hope you'll join us. One of the other things that happened is Three Magnets Beer created a commemorative beer. And the artwork that's featured on here was created by Sherry Buckner. She was a new and fledgling artist then. They commissioned her art to be the official artwork. They used that in note cards, etc. And then her mural remained on the side of the Camerano building for years following that. And so the can features that logo. It's available at both Storman stores as well as Three Magnets Beer, and you can get it at the banquet if you come. So there's that. Our logo was created by Linda Whitney, the local artist and who many of you know in other capacities, but this is when she was just getting started. We purchased the design from her, and we have lapel pins and necklaces that we sold over the years. We were created in 1983. We've been in existence for 42 years. Our goal was to preserve that history from day one. Holly Gadbaugh from this council served on there, as did later Mayor of Lacey, Jean Liddell, who was at the time this Title IX officer, and Kay Boyd, who's since passed, but she was city councilwoman. And there were some of the most powerful women in Thurston County on that committee. Jennifer Belcher and Karen Fraser, we used to meet down in Heritage Park to create our nonprofit. We are a 501c3. Created this, and for 42 years we've done that. And as you know, a lot of history ends up in closets and spare bedrooms and basements, and then when people downsize, they recycle it. So we've made sure from day one that wouldn't happen to the history of this event. We were gifted 1,200 negatives, high quality black and white negatives. So we have a major photo collection representing a photo essay of the trials. We're very proud that we've been able to preserve this history and be able to present this 40th anniversary to you. It's a groundbreaking moment because we're going to have gold medalist Joan Benoit Samuelson, gold medalist Frank Shorter in the room, as well as these women. And there's one other woman that's worth mentioning, and her name is Marilyn Bevins. Marilyn did not run in the trials. There were no women of color in the 1984 trials, and there was only one woman of color in the 1988 trials, and we've come a long way. But Marilyn Bevins ran the Boston Marathon, and she was the very first Black American woman to complete the Boston Marathon, and she's also the first Black woman to run the marathon in under 3 hours. She is in the Black Marathoners Hall of Fame. She will be here. She's flying in from Baltimore. These people are going to be here Friday night for the banquet, Saturday for the other events. And there's also the oldest woman to run was Sister Marian Irvine. She was 54 years old, Benedictine nun, and she's 94, and she could still party among the best of you. And she's very entertaining. You'll get a chance to meet her as well as these other women. And I cannot stress enough the richness of this group of women and the wonderful things they want them to do. If you have daughters, granddaughters, sisters, wives, bring them down and let them partake of the energy in that room. It's going to be exciting. Indian Summer, the doors open at 4. We are trying to get the tickets sold online because we have to do a food count. So our Facebook page is Olympia Trials Legacy Committee. We invite you to please go there if you're interested. I have some flyers here that I'll leave. Please sign up and do attend. I do want to say when Olympia got the bids to host the trials in the Olympics began working with Olympia. One of the first things they did is they wanted to sue the state of Washington over naming our mountain range the Olympic Range, because after all, they own the Olympic name, you know. And so there was a lot of true story, and I cannot use the Olympic name when we're advertising, so we had to change our name to Olympia Trials Legacy Committee. So I don't know if there's any questions. If not, I'll find out where to leave the flyers. But I can't thank you enough for doing this for us. Thank you so much. And I just can't urge all of you, both on Zoom and also here, to please try and attend one of the events, meet them. We have posters, poster of the start line, which was up at the Red Lion, near the Red Lion. The finish line was at Marathon Park. And our committee raised the money and put a marker in Marathon Park. In 2004, it was dedicated by Joan Benoit Samuelson. It's baked porcelain from Windsor Fire Farm. Drive to the far part of the park, and before you go across the foot area to the main area of Olympia, you will see it on the right-hand side. And we hope to add a second marker to that in the coming months, and it will feature the names of all the women who qualified in 1984, their qualifying times, and then their finish times when they finished the marathon. And that will be the completion of our role in this, and just hoping that the history lives on in the hearts and minds of the individuals who are going to celebrate this event and who, I hope you'll take the time to read more about it. So thank you again for your time, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Denise. And I have a copy of the proclamation here that I'll present to you now. All right, well, thank you so much again, Denise. So that takes us to public comment, and I do believe we have a couple folks signed up this evening. So just a few housekeeping things before we move into public comment. There is a timer or a clock to my right, your left, here on the wall, indicating 2 minutes time for your comments. You have your green, yellow, and red lights. The green light indicating that your time has begun, the yellow light indicating that you have about 30 seconds remaining in your comments, and the red light indicating that your time is expired. If you do not finish your comments in the 2 minutes allotted, you can feel free to email them to us. And also I ask, it is an election season, so I ask that you refrain from vocalizing any support or opposition for a candidate or ballot measure. And please refrain from referring to any candidacy during this period or at any point during the meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, I believe that both of our public commenters are in person today, and we don't have anyone signed up on virtually. So with that, we have Linnea Comstock, followed by Javon Bird.
Good evening. I watched the April 30th Law Enforcement Strategic Planning session, so my comments are related to that session. I respectfully disagree with Councilmember Gilman's opinion expressed in the Law Enforcement Strategic Planning session on April 30th that law enforcement is not needed when a business owner confronts a houseless person sleeping on their stoop. No other council members challenged his view, and I am here tonight to ask you to do so. I ask you, what job position should respond to the situation previously described? I, as a former City of Olympia business owner, contacted houseless people many times. Most of the times when my staff or myself attempted to contact these folks, we withstood threats and lack of cooperation. I owned a medically related business and had vulnerable patients as well as employees who were impacted. Law enforcement was needed in these situations many times. When they did come, they had to come after attempts to deal with these folks directly by myself or staff were made. My husband, in dealing with one of these individuals, had to take precautions because the person had a large knife in a sheath on his person. 3 years ago, a man was smoking in a landscaped area by a corner of my business. He was smoking around dry, flammable shrubs, which was an immediate fire threat to my building. My staff attempted to ask him to leave, and he did not. I went out and asked him to leave, and I was met by his comment of, "I can take you on." I responded by stating, "That may be true, but you still need to leave." I did not call 911, but in fact, what he did was level a criminal threat at me, leaving me to wonder if I should have. So my time's up, so I'm going to email my recommendations forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem.
Javon, did you have a public comment as well?
Hello, everyone. So I just got back from Nigeria for the month, and you might be, I know you are all familiar with my work in the schools and just bringing African music education to the community. Another project that we're working on right now is to establish a sister city relationship between Ilobu, Nigeria, and the city of Olympia to help promote and bridge and make a bridge between culture, right? Interestingly enough, when I went down there, amongst the cultural community, I was given a chieftaincy, right? And then but I didn't even know they were going to give that to me. But my goal was to talk about developing this partnership. And I sent an email out beforehand, and I know everybody's busy, right? And so when I went out there, I just spoke to the local government because, I wanted to take care of things on that end because I spoke to former Mel Selby, who was really big with the sister city relationships, partnership, and kind of told me about what Olympia has going on with that. And, that definitely is something that's possible. When I went there, met with the local government, but then the king actually ended up figuring out what we were doing, and then so I was brought to the palace. And when I kind of told them what I was doing, they're like, "Oh, wow, that sounds like an interesting project." And I said, "Yeah, maybe we can, with the schools, with the children, kind of have Zoom talks and have the kids do like exchanges on that end." So they ended up giving me another chieftaincy and gave me a name called Omobowale, which is our child's come back home or whatnot. And so beyond, so basically I'm just bringing this forward to City Council to let you know that I will be following up and, emailing you all and just wanting to figure out what the process would be for us to potentially, move forward with that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's everyone.
All right, so that concludes public comment for this evening. Any comments from council? Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you. I agree with Ms. Comstock that I think that the question is what job description should respond. So I appreciate that, and I think we'll continue on our oversight of law enforcement and our reimagining public safety to figure out what's the right sort of job description or role to respond to different situations. I appreciate that, and Siobhan, I'm really grateful that you continue to be an ambassador and making connections. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Well, I appreciate both of you coming here tonight. I think we all do. Linnea, I will be looking for your email with some of those suggestions. I know I can just speak for myself. Oftentimes when we're doing a study session or we're hearing out reports, I don't always, or reports from staff, I don't necessarily, well, it's not a practice of mine to say, hey, unless we're voting on something, to say, hey, I agree, I disagree or agree with my colleague on something, unless it's kind of being asked or I feel so called to. I think that, we're all at large, but oftentimes we don't agree on things, and sometimes we do, but I think it's important that everyone's voices be heard, so when you hear council not challenging it, or I guess I would offer when you hear other council members not challenging it, it doesn't necessarily mean that we all co-sign it. It just means that, hey, we can recognize that that's true for some folks, right? And anyway, sometimes it requires a police response, and sometimes it doesn't. And again, looking forward to learning more from your email. Javon, I am intrigued by your experience in Nigeria. It sounds like if that happened to me, I'd say, wow. Well, it wouldn't probably happen to me, right? But I'd probably think, wow, I'm in a wild dream right now. This is awesome. So I'd love to meet with you, to hear more about it. And I have the fortunate opportunity of chairing the Community Livability and Public Safety Committee, and that is the committee, one of the work plan items is to look at how are we making decisions on how we sister city with folks? We only have one currently. And also, that's with Kato, Japan. And also, how are we really making it fruitful, making it more than just something that we say, but how do we feel it? How do we realize it? How do we make sure that it's not just really wonderful trips, right, back and forth? And that's great. And there's a lot of learning that happens for delegation members that get to go on those trips, whether it's folks coming to Olympia or folks going to Kato, Japan, and also what happens after that. So for me, I'll just hold my hands up, and I've been someone that loves this idea of sharing cultural connections. I love sister cities. I'm not against them. And I also challenge, are we really how are we holding up our end, before we add more sister cities? So I look forward to chatting with you more about that. It's not a no for me. It's just want to share a little bit of where I'm at because you took the time to come down here tonight. And it's a work plan item for us this year on the committee, so kind of timely. Anyway, thank you.
Any other comments from council? Yeah, I think Mayor Pro Tem, you summed up your response to Javon pretty well. I think that there is certainly room for a broader conversation about our sister city program. However, I do just kind of want to manage expectations just a bit that realistically we have received a number of requests to have sister cities with various locations, around the globe, frankly. And so we certainly will be taking a look at that, but we also understand that is sort of in conjunction with our conversation about how do we grow our existing sister city relationship with Kato, Japan. And while I haven't had the pleasure of going myself, I've heard that they roll out the red carpet and then some when we visit them. And so we owe our partners in Kato, a similar experience as possible when they come to visit Olympia, which they will be in August, and we're looking forward to that. So we hear you, and we look forward to hearing more. On the comments in regards to, law enforcement responding to our houseless community members in front of businesses. Certainly, that is one approach, but I do just want to take this time to remind our community that we also have non-law enforcement interventions it would be also appropriate for them to intervene in those situations as well. So I certainly don't want your comments to fall on deaf ears. We hear them. So while I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, I just wanted to add that additional context to your comments as well, that certainly there is a role for our police department, but preferably we would have non-law enforcement interventions to handle those interactions. So thank you for coming tonight. So that takes us to adoption of the consent calendar. I am tracking one pull this evening, item 4B, requested to be pulled by Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. I just had a question about the striking of elector of Thurston County. I was just curious. I read that like it meant, like it was an old-timey term for a registered voter. But I'm curious what it actually means and if we considered whether it was meant to be a registered voter.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the purpose of removing it was to address the inclusivity of people who can participate on the commission. So that was one of the items that we decided, that the committee decided, recommending to the council to expand people's ability to participate. So we're not limiting.
So people that don't participate in the election of the city council can set the salary for the city council?
Yes. Also in the proposal is removing the term citizen and having it be resident. So people who live within the city, whether they are a documented citizen or not, can also participate on the commission.
Yeah, and I those all read as fine amendments to me, and the two that were city comparisons on MRSC, neither of them had that language, so I'm not looking for a change today, but if it meant registered voter, that's what I would prefer, is that the voters who elect us set our salaries and not anyone else. So was that a conversation at the Community Livability and Public Safety Committee?
I don't believe that it was. I do believe that we talked extensively, probably more so on the use of the word citizen over resident, if I can recall correctly. And I thought that there was maybe a response to why we landed on that. I'm not quite sure. But I am inclined to agree with you if that is in fact what it's referring to.
I mean, I'm all for inclusivity, but
Sure.
you got to participate in the game to play the game.
Absolutely, yeah.
Being democracy, just so no one thinks that that's a flip comment. So.
Sure. Any comments from?
Did you want to say?
Oh, just quickly, this was something that was brought to the Community Livability and Public Safety. So it's not necessarily a surprise tonight to us. Staff did bring it to us, and we didn't talk about it as much. But I think ultimately we were just landing on it because we didn't see it as a standard for other cities.
In the
But-
comparisons. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
but I'm open to it. I mean, we can talk about it. I wouldn't be against it, but that was why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amendment from the dais, send it back to the committee.
City Manager Bernie.
Microphones are a little funky
Yeah,
this
they're-
last couple of weeks. So, thank you. I want to just add for context, as we looked at comparisons in other cities, I think a lot of this conversation is around, Debbie mentioned inclusivity, but we also talked about what are other cities doing around this, and it was this registered voter, whether you are or aren't, wasn't consistent across all jurisdictions who have salary commissions, and so we picked a line about, and we landed on the side of more inclusivity, I think, in that conversation, in terms of asking to remove that. You have some options tonight. You can set this aside tonight so we can take some time to talk more about it and bring this back to you at a future agenda versus trying to make a decision on what you want to do with the language tonight. I might make that recommendation to you is to omit this from your decision-making tonight. Let us take it back and talk more about it with you and then bring you a new version if we need to do that.
That sounds good to me, if there is consensus, council members.
And then we don't have the discussion with people missing either.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Councilmember Cooper, for raising this. I'm inclined to agree with that. Frankly, you can't even sit up here if you're not a registered voter and serve on the council, and so it makes sense that that would be consistent. Councilmember Gilman.
So, as we're doing this additional work, there are two requests I would have. One is to get a clear definition of this elector of Thurston County. And the other one is, I understood that part of the decision was our legal staff looking at what was and wasn't in the legislation that lays this out. So, so just having those two reviews, so we're clear about what this language is we're either going to reinstate or remove. And that we also are clear about whether this is to bring it in alignment with the state code or it's a decision that we have.
Go ahead.
Assistant City Manager Sullivan.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that we took a look at what was required within the RCW and what was documented in our OMCs, and this particular item is not a requirement of the RCW.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion and the path forward. I think to add resident and registered voter in the city of Olympia and skip the old-timey elector language. But it reads in line with the state law to me, and I see how you got there, because it's not something that's in the comparisons that are on MRSC. But definitely was a flag for me, mostly because I wanted to understand what that term meant, because it's not used very often. So, thank you.
All right. Any additional questions or comments? All right. So at this time, I need a motion to adopt the consent calendar minus item 4B, which is the approval of an ordinance amending the code related to the Independent Salary Commission.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Consent calendar is adopted. So that takes us to item 5A, which is a public hearing and approval of a resolution adopting fees for redacting body-worn camera footage requested under the Public Records Act. And here to present to us this evening on this item is our city clerk, Sean Creer. Hi, Sean.
Hi. For the record, my name is Sean Creer. Pronouns he, him, his. As you mentioned, my title is City Clerk with City of Olympia. And today I'll be talking about the fees related to our body-worn camera redaction fees. So the agenda, I'm going to go over a little bit of a background around body-worn cameras and how City Clerk Services has been involved in our partnership with OPD. I'll be going over, again, our current process, our proposal, and then next steps. So I just want to start by introducing the other people with me, Janelle Stoll and Michael Fulmer. Janelle is with OPD and Michael Fulmer is with City Clerk Services. Our mission at City Clerk Services is to help departments deliver equitable, open, responsible government services. Sorry. Ooh, okay. So I just want to start, this rolled out in 2022. That is when body-worn cameras went live in the city. But my part in it really started in 2021 when the council decided to encourage us to move forward with body-worn cameras. And I was embedded with OPD for the procurement of body-worn cameras. And for me, it was probably the most meaningful work I've done with the city. And what really made that possible was working with all of the police officers and how everyone there was committed to making this a success. And that is what made it so meaningful to me. And as part of that, I was also involved in helping OPD build a process for people to request that body-worn camera footage we were creating. OPD does an amazing job with its public records requests. They process over 4,000 a year. For some context, that's over 80% in the city. That's far larger than most cities of Olympia's size. So they really do a great job at promoting transparency in the community through the public records process, which I'm a real geek about. I love it. So here's also kind of a look at body-worn cameras. It's become a major component of our public records process here at the city. We do a lot of it now. It's a major part of the workload for the OPD's records staff team. So one of the questions that's been asked too as part of this process is, how long do we actually keep body-worn camera footage? And the answer is we keep pretty much all of it. There are times when it's used in court related to an incident. If there's legal proceedings involved with it, it's kept for the length of those legal proceedings. If there's any appeals, once they're exhausted, at that point, the court may authorize its deletion. Those are the only cases where OPD actually deletes any of its body-worn camera footage. And the volume's kind of staggering right now. We have 13,000 hours of footage going all the way back to 2022. So as somebody who loves information, managing information, this is quite the challenge, and OPD does an exceptional job keeping it secure and making it accessible to the public. And this slide is really why I'm here today. OPD, their average response time to a records request is 3.4 days, which is phenomenal. Most of the people who request records from the police department receive the records they're asking for within 1 day. But if it involves body-worn cameras, it's taking us 28 days to do this, and we want to see this come down. So this does get kind of into the minutia, but how can we bring this down? And that's actually around changing how we estimate the costs we charge people. And that's why we're coming to you today. You're the people who can approve a new estimation process. And to set some more context, most people aren't charged when they request body-worn camera footage. 73% get this footage for free. We redact it and provide it when it's requested. And that's because most requesters fit into these categories here. If you're involved in an incident captured on body-worn camera footage, you can request it and we'll provide it free. If it's involved in a criminal case that you're a part of, you can get it for free. And unique to City of Olympia, and here's again, why do I love working for City of Olympia? The community requested an additional category not in the RCWs, and that is nonprofit organizations. No other city in the state provides this free of charge, body-worn camera free of charge. So I think this is something really special we do. And then there's also another category you don't see in the RCWs that we make available. And that is if we have body-worn camera footage, we've already redacted it, anyone else can come and request it, and we'll provide it to them free of charge. So infrequently, this is where somebody has been involved in an incident, they've requested it, we've redacted it, provided it free. Then another community member who may not fall into those exempt categories will request it and receive it for free. So I'm hoping you're sensing some enthusiasm for me on transparency. I love it. Why am I putting up a barrier to the public getting access to this? Or why are we charging this fee to begin with? And that is because this technology, when it was first rolled out around the state, Cities were targeted by requesters. A couple of people would make frequent requests for large amounts of body-worn camera footage, and it kind of ground the whole process to a halt. So we go back to equitable access to records. People involved in incidences were finding themselves at the end of a long line, waiting for other requesters in front of them. And so those backlogs, you saw 28 days, it could be a lot longer if we didn't have these fees in place. So let's dig into what this process looks like. When somebody's requested a record, a body-worn camera footage, and we've determined that they need to pay, we actually take a look at the footage and watch the entire video. And by us, I'm actually referring to OPD record staff. This is an emotional, heavy work that they do. I couldn't do it, and it's again a pleasure to work with them and to see that it is emotionally draining to them. So they will watch all the requested footage, estimate how long it'll take them to redact this footage, and collect a 10% deposit from the requester. Once the city receives that 10% deposit, we begin that work of redacting the footage. And then once we've completed it, we don't charge them that total we've estimated. OPD staff will actually time themselves, determine how long they spent redacting that video, and charge the requester that actual amount of staff time. So where this becomes key, one recent example, an incident 1 hour long happened. OPD officers were called, 5 of them. 5 hours of footage of body-worn camera was created. Staff had to spend 5 hours watching that footage to come up with that estimate. We want to avoid that happening. So OPD kind of took a step back and said, is there a better way we can be doing this? And it started with doing a time study, finding out what is the average amount of time that they spend redacting a minute of video. We also looked at the salary of staff performing the work. And after 6 months, we discovered that it took about 5 minutes, and I love to be precise, it's probably a city clerk thing, 5 minutes and 1 second on average to redact each minute of body-worn camera footage. It costs about 82 cents in staff time. That's salary and benefits of the lowest paid employee performing this work at the city. And that's important to determining that actual cost. When setting that actual cost for a city, you can include salary, benefits. You can also be including training, software, hardware, any office supplies the office space staff occupy while they're performing this work. We can be charging requesters that too. We have not added that into our actual costs, that final total we charge requesters. So what we would like to do is put a new process in place when we do that estimation. And that would be look at the minute of requested video, take that average. Takes us about 4 minutes to redact 1 minute of body-worn camera footage, and then charge that that $4. Let me see, I'm doing a horrible job reading that. Basically, if you request an hour of footage, we would take 60 minutes and time it times that $4 and come up with that estimate. So instead of taking that 5 hours, you could just run a simple calculation in your head, figure out what 10% of that is, and that's what we would charge the requester. So again, to get back to that example, 5 hours that was spent determining an estimate could instead be spent actually redacting the footage people are requesting. So that's the proposal we're bringing to you. If you were to approve this new estimation structure, we would put it in place in 30 days from the passage of the associated resolution. So what questions do you guys have? Or do you have, council members?
Thank you, Sean. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I think you're passionate about a lot of things at the City of Olympia. Every time I hear a presentation from you, it's different topics. But yes, This is one of the reasons why I like it so much, so it's great that we have such passionate staff, or at least one in you. I have a comment and then I have a question. In the, maybe it was like the very first slide, I think there's a couple of slides for calculating how much staff time it costs. What wasn't talked about, I totally understand why, but was the impact on staff, right? That's not necessarily it's not a financial cost. It sort of is holistically, if there's burnout, but it is not an easy thing to do to review that footage, right? And that's not to say that we have terrible things happening in the footage sometimes, but it is, you're still, I think even at its lowest case, you are watching someone, when you go through the redaction process, you're watching someone on one of the worst days of their lives. And sometimes the worst, and it's not a comfortable, fun thing to do. For what it's worth, I just want to let you know that it's something that we understand. It's something I understand to be true. And then I have a question. If you could go back to the slide before this one. I don't know if I understand this slide. The last part is throwing me off.
So again, the first part of the process is we have to come up with how much time we think will be how much time will take us to do this work. We have to create an estimate, and that's where we charge that 10% deposit. But at the very end of the day, when the person gets that footage, they will have paid that 10% deposit and then whatever the actual time is. So if we estimate it's going to take us 5 hours to do the redaction work, we only charge them for 4 hours if that's how long it took. So kind of what I was saying here is we are changing how we estimate and figure out what that 10% deposit is. But when that person comes to collect that body footage at the end of the day, this change is not affecting how much they'll be paying it. So if it costs you $5 today to pick up that footage, when it's all processed, 30 days from now would still only cost you that $5. So we're not changing the final cost we charge somebody, just that how we figure out what that initial 10% deposit is.
Thank you. That's helpful. It's potentially a pretty penny.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. Thank you, Sean. It's I appreciate your passion for this because it's what we're all about. It's that transparency. So thank you. So I just want to try to understand the hour example. If somebody's looking at a call that was an hour, is it typical that you're redacting something throughout that whole hour of the call, or it might only be 10 minutes of that hour of footage?
It may only be 10 minutes of that footage, but staff will need to watch all 5 hours to determine how many minutes within it do they need to be redacted. Other factors that can take into play how many people are on the video, how many faces may need to be blurred out. When they're creating that estimate, it also may be how much movement is happening to the people on the screen. So we use very advanced software here to automate as much as possible, but when those factors start coming into play, it really requires it's a very manual process. So when they're doing that estimation, it may be 5 hours to create that estimate, but they may only estimate that it'll take them 10 minutes to do the redaction work.
That makes sense. So the user will get an estimate based on the whole call time, but then the actual cost could be a fair bit less.
Yeah.
Because it's minutes within the, okay, that's really helpful. And then I'm glad you had mentioned advanced software. I recently learned that the city of Dallas is using Microsoft Copilot AI to redact body cam video. So
There's lots I'm passionate about. Let's not go to Copilot, but what I will say, we do use advanced software, and I will look into that.
I think in the lines of work that we're in, we will get left behind if we don't stay on the cutting edge of AI, unfortunately. And that means we have to be smart about it and have good policy, but also figure out how people are doing things cheaper with it. So, thank you.
All right, any other questions from council? I just have one, Sean. There was a slide where you said that, the exemption slide, you said nonprofit organizations, and I just want to be sure, I think the staff report says it, that nonprofit organizations that are working on relevant issues. So it's not just any nonprofit that is exempt from, paying for this fee for footage.
Sorry for the inaccuracy in the staff report. It's actually any nonprofit, so.
Any nonprofit.
Any nonprofit.
Okay. Well, I'm not quite, is there a reason for that? Is it in statute?
We got a lot of nonprofits in the city.
That was just a request from the community that any nonprofit could come in and ask for that footage, regardless of what the nonprofit did.
Huh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. I think we're all stewing on that because that's surprising to me. Councilmember Cooper.
Just to play off that, Mayor Payne, do we know what volume of the redactions you're doing are from the nonprofit exclusion?
So we did look at them, like the exact number, I don't know, but it is a very small percent of the requests we receive.
That's enough for me.
Okay. It's a great clarifying question. Thank you. All right. Well, I have no further questions. So with that, we will move on to open the public hearing. We don't have anyone signed up for public comment for the hearing this evening, but at this time, I am going to open the public hearing on approval of a resolution adopting fees for redacting body-worn camera footage requested under the Public Records Act. So it's standard practice that although there's nobody signed up in advance, that we open it up to those who are present in the chambers who wish to speak or comment on this issue in the hearing this evening. Is there anyone in the chambers that would like to speak to this item? Please come forward to the podium. Please be sure to mention your name for the record and begin your comments. You have 3 minutes for your comments during a hearing.
Linnea Comstock, back again. I'm just listening to the discussion, and I am too a bit taken aback, like the council, on the every nonprofit thing. So I would encourage you to trim that down, the relevant. That's my comment.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Any additional comments from anyone in the chambers? Seeing none, at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing on the approval of a resolution adopting fees for redacting body-worn camera footage requested under the Public Records Act. All right. Okay. All right, so my mic is now working. So that takes us to item 6A, which is the 2023 Police Auditor Annual Report.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, yes.
there was a proposed action on this item, if you'd like to take one tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, my apologies. I'm jumping ahead. Yes, 3 council actions. Would anybody like to make a motion? Councilmember Cooper.
Is your question relevant to the motion?
Yeah.
Okay, so she had a question.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen, followed by Councilmember Cooper.
I guess this is more of a comment. I appreciate that there's fee exemptions. I don't feel comfortable with the any nonprofit. I do think it needs to be a nonprofit organization working on relevant issues, and not just any nonprofit that decided that they wanted to work on a relevant issue, but a nonprofit that is in place to work on relevant issues. So I would be in favor of an amendment.
Okay, and I just want to ask a clarifying question that that amendment, would that have anything to do with this particular process as it relates to the hearing, or would that be an amendment to code at a different time? Could you clarify that?
The deputy city attorney and I were just talking on the side. I think we'd want to tighten up the language to get the language how you'd want it around nonprofits versus kind of doing it on the fly. So I might recommend that you accept the recommendation as it is so you can get the fee portion done tonight. And then we have a follow-up action to bring this back to you to clarify that language and code in a future update, which we can do, if that works for you.
If we're going to accept this, we should accept this language then. Sorry.
Yes, so what we can do is then accept the motion and provide a caveat in the motion that says that we will,
Correct.
yes, amend the code. Okay. Councilmember Cooper, followed by Councilmember Gilman.
Do you want me to make a motion, or are you going to keep the discussion going?
I was going to weigh in on this discussion, but I can do it before or after you make.
Okay, I mean, I've said the microphone all the way in too. I think that will require more time because it's a conversation we had with the community about implementing body cams. And it was my understanding from the presentation that was something that was asked for by the community, and that's why that exemption exists. So I'd hate to unknowingly make that amendment.
Councilmember Gilman.
Good. Similarly, I just wanted to say that we'll have to figure out something more than working on relevant issues. I'm not. It gets pretty squishy to try to figure out criteria that says these folks are in, these folks are out. These people legitimately can ask for the recordings. So I don't think that using working on relevant issues is a better hold than just leaving it as it's presented to us tonight.
I can leave it open. Okay, Mayor, if it's okay.
Yep.
Okay, I move to approve the resolution adopting fees for redacting body-worn camera footage requested under the Public Records Act, with the understanding that there may be a future amendment around nonprofit exemptions.
I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you. All right. Now we will move on to item 6A, which is the 2023 Police Auditor Annual Report Briefing. And here to kick us off this evening is our Assistant City Manager, Debbie Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor, and is this on?
Not yet.
No.
Hello?
There you go.
Yes.
Okay,
there we
thank
go.
you. So, thank you, Mayor and council members. For the record, I'm Debbie Sullivan, Assistant City Manager, she, her pronouns. And I am your liaison to the Civilian Police Auditor, Tara Parker, with Clarity Investigations Consulting. Tonight, you'll receive a briefing on the auditor's end-of-year report, which covers incidents from January 1st to December 31st of 2023. But before we get started, I want to give you some background. Over the past year, the Social Justice and Equity Commission has been working with the Community Work Group and the Olympia Police Department to evaluate our current system of oversight. Those recommendations will be presented to the Community Livability and Public Safety Committee on May 22nd and at a City Council study session on June 11th. While the Commission has been leading this process, we've continued with our current system of oversight, which includes your police auditor, providing an independent review and audit of the police department's uses of force and its internal complaint investigations, and the Commission providing input on that report. When the 2023 annual report was completed, the Commission wanted to take the opportunity to test some of the elements of the draft recommendation, specifically the recommendation that a future community board would meet quarterly with the police auditor to receive a summary of the auditor's findings and recommendations and provide input. So on March 11th, a subcommittee of the Commission met with the police auditor, and they redesigned how that meeting works. They started with the police chief sharing an overview of the department's activities in 2023, which provided them a holistic look of everything that happened during that year for the police department. The auditor followed up by presenting an overview of the misconduct complaints, use of force incident reports audited, the findings, and the recommendations. And the commission shared their community perspective to the auditor regarding the report. This meeting was invaluable for the police chief, the auditor, and the commission. We learned from this experience, and as a result, minor changes were made to the draft recommendation that you will see on May 22nd and June 11th. So tonight, we want to recreate that a little bit. The deputy police chief will brief you on the department's activities in 2023, followed by the auditor, who will highlight her findings and recommendations, and finally, the co-chair of the commission will summarize their letter to council, which touches on both the auditor's report and insights on the pilot meeting. Before I turn it over, I do want to say that the full report is on our website, and you can just search on police auditor. So with that, I'll turn it over to the deputy chief.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Sam Costello, I'm the Deputy Chief of Police, and I use he, him pronouns. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview. I feel like we've been talking a lot lately. You guys have seen me a lot. I apologize on behalf of Chief Allen. He's not feeling well, so I had most of a half of a part of a day to get ready for this. So if I'm a little spotty, that's the reason, but I'll give it my best shot here. So we'll start with some of the things that you've probably heard a little bit about, but we'll touch on them. 23 was a pretty busy year for us, particularly in the administrative side of things. Pretty regular patrol year, but a pretty busy administrative year. So we came up with a new mission, vision, values statement in 2023 that was a cooperative effort of a number of our employees from different parts of the organization. We have a new 5-year strategic plan, and one of the things that's not here is that we're also participating in the rewriting of the comprehensive plan for the city with regard to the public safety chapter. So that's also in the mix. Commonly referred to as a staffing study that's probably titled, and you may have seen it referred to as the comprehensive study of the police department, and it comes with its own 100 and something recommendations. We worked on that a little bit. Leadership development, we have some folks going to different national level courses in police administrative leadership and that sort of thing that are a little bit selective and hard to get into. We've been working hard. Deputy Chief Parker has been working very, very hard on policy implementation. So we're revising our policy and creating new policy where we're missing some. So the jail facility and the transition from what was a municipal facility to the Nisqually Correctional Facility out there, it's a much better situation. The records management system is in the process of being replaced, and so we're working on that. And then the crisis response unit, we have some those on foot downtown now as well, which was a little bit of a change for us. So some data we'll just go through. Some of this is pretty self-explanatory, and I'll touch on some of the high points here. You can see, we heard earlier, the public disclosure requests are, we usually get, we have the most in the city by a very, very, very long shot. So you can see that we took almost 7,700 police reports. And familiar faces, I think that's a notable one as well. You have to remember that there are 2 of those people. So when you talk about 50, that's 25 per. So they're working pretty hard. So look at the crisis response unit. Total contacts is about 3,100, a little bit more than that. And so you'll look at how they were dispatched. A lot of those come through TCOM, so you can make a mistake with the TCOM, and that's 911 for those that are not clear. So some of the fire, some of the OFD ones will come back through dispatch, and so they're a little bit difficult to parse through. And so there's the OFD number may be a little bit higher than it shows here. The self-initiated went up considerably due to the foot patrol was a big addition to the self-initiated crew activity. Some crime, you can see that robbery's up a little bit. I think it's notable to say that 24 of those 92 that you can see in that upper left category there in 23 are related to shoplifts gone wrong. So force used in order to retain property that was stolen from usually a larger store. So that looks like a higher number than it would normally be. There's a domestic violence component to both the felony and misdemeanor assault that drives a little bit of that. But they are in line with years past, so there's nothing terribly different about them. You can see on the far right, the percentages, they hold pretty standard for years as we go. Auto thefts are up from years past. We had a really high number in 2022, largely attributed to Kias and Hyundais. They became stealable, and that was a really high year for us. So, and it correlated with some other crime that we saw related to the use of those cars that you probably saw in the press. Commercial burglaries are down. In 23, they're also down in 24 thus far. Residential burglaries holding about the same, and then trespass is somewhere in the middle. And that was largely due to an emphasis downtown on people that were trespassing at businesses downtown. So, and that started in 2022 largely. So we look at uses of force, 56,000, just over 56,000 calls for service, which generated 3,108 arrests, and it's notable down there, the 633 were cited and released, so those are 633 people that were not taken into physical custody. So that subtract that from the number of actual physical arrests, and then you look at the use of force incidents at 52, which is 1.6% of those arrests, which is fairly low. It's both low for us and continuing, as you can see, to decrease. It's also low on the national average as well. It is usually a very, very small percentage, but it is low in Olympia, even lower. So, training that we're engaged in, post I-940, all kinds of requirements with regard to de-escalation training. Patrol tactics is a thing, and it's all about de-escalation, and the law requires that we both certify and then recertify officers periodically in that. So we're doing that this year. Crisis intervention training, we have for a very, very long time and continue to certify every officer in 40 hours of crisis intervention training, which is dealing with those obviously in crisis and experiencing mental health episodes and things like that. So we had a recommendation by the auditor for some youth de-escalation training. We did see an increase in use of force against youth, and so that was one recommendation that we are going to implement this year. Catholic Community Services is going to help us a little bit with some training in that regard. So de-escalation is part of every scenario that people are trained in at this point. With regard to physical scenario-based training, everything has a de-escalation component, and it's taken into account mostly due to the PTI nature of the I-940 law. It's required at this point. So. And then OPD staff also engaged in the diversity, equity, and inclusion training that the city put on. It's fairly expansive, and we got all our employees through that. So, policy, like I said, policy, we're deep in policy, and we will continue to be deep in policy, as you'll see on another slide. Our policy 320 was standards of conduct, and one of the things that the auditor had some questions about was some of the language that was in there or not in there, as it were. And so we took a look at that, and the city policy was the preferred language, and that's what we installed in our policy, just to make it fit a little bit better with the city and to make sure that we were in line. So, and then this one's probably the more notable of the two, policy 1010 on complaints. Historically, for as long as I've been here, we've used service level and serious complaints. I think everybody, that's a little bit outdated. Everybody was a little bit uncomfortable calling one thing more serious or service level than another, and so everything to us is a complaint. It can be handled differently and in a different part of the organization, but everything is simply a complaint. And you can see 68 policies were updated. I'd say that we have another 40 in process right now, maybe more. It is eventually our intention to seek accreditation, so we need to make sure that our policies are in line, and so we've been doing a lot of work in that regard with our labor groups to get input and that sort of thing, and it's an ongoing process. So looking ahead, the staffing study, again, many of you know it as the comprehensive study, so we have some implementation of both recommendations as well as some things that go, staffing, other equipment needs, things like that, facilities that go into that. The strategic plan has some implementation things that we need to work on as well. And then we touched on the RMS replacement. Policy is going to be ongoing. And then we're looking at some ways to, obviously we know that crime doesn't stay just in Olympia or just in Tumwater, so we're looking at ways that we can partner with our local agent, our partners in other local agencies to come up with a more regional response to some of the crime trends that we see in auto theft and burglary and things like that, things that are kind of cross-jurisdictional. So that is all I have for you, and I'm going to turn it over to the auditor unless you have some questions.
Any questions for Deputy Chief Costello? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen, followed by Councilmember Cooper.
Thanks for your presentation. I have a question for the policy 1010, the language change, right? The service level and serious level differences. So I know this is not the first time I'm receiving this information, but it is curious. There is this balance of wanting to use thoughtful and more forward-thinking language, and then there's also, especially in public safety, there is also the reality of like working every day, right? Sometimes you just need to know what it is and like what level it is. So can you tell me how is that working for staff? That's a little in the weeds, but I'm just interested.
I don't think it changes much day to day.
Okay.
I think, generally speaking, it was a more preferred on the city side. I don't know that it changes the day-to-day operations of how we were doing things.
For the
day-to-day
complaint. Oh,
operational.
I see.
Yeah, no.
So you didn't really need it.
I wouldn't, we wouldn't have changed it if we didn't need to change it. I just don't think it has an operational effect at the line level.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. Thank you, Chief. This is helpful. Can you just talk a little bit about how a policy change is rolled out in the department? And then a little bit from your perspective about the benefits and the implications of being accredited.
Sure. I'll start with the policy sort of development and rollout. So we have policies and they're long-standing. A lot of them general orders is what they're called. So if you go online, you'll see it says general order. That is a policy. We've switched in recent years to a Lexipol policy. Lexipol is sort of a one-stop shop that it's a nationwide sort of clearinghouse for policies that are regionalized for different states and different areas. So we use Lexipol. But what it requires is for us to take that Lexipol policy, which is sort of the generic, cut and paste policy. Some agencies just take those and they put them right into their policy and nobody questions it, and that's that. For us, we find that they need to be more customized for our community and our agency in order to reflect what we're doing day to day so that we're not even a little bit in violation of a policy because we didn't take the time to write down what we're actually doing and make sure that it's in alignment. So once when we engage in that, then we obviously seek input from the labor groups to see if they have input. They're the ones doing the work so that we can ensure that we all have a mutual understanding. And then we'll make a change. When we make the change, it will go into our system, which is Power DMS, which is a kind of a management system for those documents. And then there's a tracking mechanism where officers, employees in general will get an email saying that there's a new policy, and they'll have to go in, read it thoroughly, and acknowledge that they've read it. And then that is when it is officially, it's published, they have to read it, and then they acknowledge it, and we have a record of that. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, though I'm kind of deer in the headlights because it's a new thing for me to learn how that works in the department. So I appreciate you expanding on that. And then just the accreditation.
Oh, I'm
quickly.
sorry. Accreditation, there are two different varieties of accreditation for law enforcement agencies in the nation. One is CALEA, and the other one is, not in the nation, in Washington. In Washington, there's also WASPIC, which is much more common. So the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs runs an accreditation program, which is essentially an audit of your policies to make sure that you're in compliance with best practices and the most contemporary things in law enforcement in the state. So we're seeking that. One of the benefits that we looked for a long time to see if there was some sort of financial, are we going to get a reduction in our insurance premiums, things like that, and there wasn't much in that regard. But it still has value in that we want to make sure that we are in line with best practices and that we're doing the things that we need to be doing to keep the officers safe, to keep the community safe, and to make sure that we're safeguarding evidence and all of the things that it covers. But it's essentially taking an audit of the entire agency, sort of a deep dive.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gilman.
I've been waiting to say DC Costello, because it sounds like all those British TV shows. Oh, DC?
I feel like it's a comic book.
I like it. I like it. First, I wanted to appreciate that this is a lot of change, your first couple slides. It's a lot of moving parts and a lot of change, and that in a recent attending a briefing and a ride-along with OPD and then a visit to one of the fire stations, the morale was pretty good, at least while I was in there visiting with them. They were positive about all this, and one comment that really stuck out to me was one of the folks said, I just want to be here to help people. So you tell me, you know, which calls I go out on and what I should do, but I'm here to help people. And so I just wanted to underscore that we're asking a lot, making a lot of changes, and the first responders are responding. So I appreciate that a great deal. I have two questions. One is just, I didn't know what civil orders are.
So a civil order can be any number of different, usually they're like domestic violence protection orders, or it could be an anti-harassment order or a no contact order. It's any number of orders issued in a civil fashion, usually between people.
Got it, thank you. And then as you were going through this last year's crime statistics, we had a lot of news coverage about marijuana retailers, and we had some conversation about people using stolen cars to gain access to those stores. Is there enough of those incidents that happen to show up in a summary slide like this? Is it just that they're high visibility kinds of things to do, right? To crash a car into a store?
High visibility, our occurrence is pretty low. It's single digits, low single digits, but it's pretty notable when it happens because of the damage that it causes. But we did get a few that kind of running into not just marijuana dispensaries, but just businesses in general. And I think that was just region-wide. It was Western Washington-wide. The Kias, the Hyundais, stolen usually that were involved, but it's very low here.
Good, that's terrible, scary practice. Well, thank you, thanks.
Yeah.
Councilmember Vanderpool.
What's the next steps for us? What's the next policy implementation? Where do we go from here?
So there are a number of policies that we're working on. We just finished a new canine policy. We're working on a policy related to community service officers, which is another unarmed position that we intend to use to respond to some low-level calls, as well as do mostly transports out to Nisqually as a result of the corrections facility being down. There are a whole bunch in line that we're working on, and those are the two that are kind of at the forefront right now. But we'll continue to go. We started with the highest liability ones. We started with use of force and some of the more notable higher liability ones, and we're working our way into sort of the weeds at this point. So we're hopeful that we can get further into the weeds as 24 continues, and then into 25 we can really get to some of the more mundane things that we need to have but don't really affect the day-to-day operations. We've gotten through a lot of the high liability day-to-day effect policies. So,
Thank you, Councilmember Vanderpool. I think that was a good setup question for what I was going to mention, but you kind of already answered it. I was going to ask about the prioritization specifically of the policy work that you're doing. Because we had talked about a couple of weeks ago for the study session, some of the recommendations that came out of the strategic plan, one of them being our duty to intervene policy that I mentioned that should be prioritized. And so I'm glad to hear you say that there is a prioritization of those things that are obviously liability potentially, but also you know, obviously that's a very important policy that will specify what an officer must do and what intervening looks like. And so that's a policy that I certainly would like to see, that I'm sure my colleagues would agree and appreciate to see prioritized on your list of policy updates that are needed.
I'll comment on that one real quick.
Sure.
That particular policy, I think we recognized based on your input that we needed to take a look at it. It wasn't just about the intervening and how to do that appropriately, but then there was a big gap in what do we do after? Like, so after you intervene, then what does the reporting look like? Do you report who and what do you report, and where does that go from there? So it did cause us to take a broader look at that policy, so.
Okay. It's great to know. Thank you, Chief. Any other questions from council? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'd like to invite Tara Parker, who's going to be joining us via Zoom.
Well, good evening, Mayor Payne and council members. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, I'm gonna do my share screen thing, which is sometimes complicated. See if that works. All right. So hopefully you can all see that. Well, I'm very happy to have heard the prior presentations, particularly Deputy Chief Costello hit on a lot of things that are referred to in my slides and certainly reported on in the written report. So I'll probably just give a real high-level review of some of that similar data. But again, very happy to be able to present the 2023 annual report. And there we go. So again, I'll just kind of quickly cover the data and trends. Definitely, happy to invite questions about those as we move through. And I'll talk about, the complaints as well as the use of force. Want to focus on key developments. As you've already heard, that 2023 was really, I think, an incredibly busy and productive, exciting year for the police department. And then I made 3 recommendations, so I'll discuss those with you. The use force data, real briefly, as you've already heard, there were 52 arrests that involved 1 or more uses of force. That was down. I'll be commenting on that a little more. I agree with the Deputy Chief. Really big reduction, a 24% reduction in uses of force. And frankly, I would say it's really worth noting that calls for service were up in 2023. And so to have this use of force number be down 24%, I think is a lot to be encouraged by and proud of. Similar to previous years, the vast majority of the types of force involved takedowns, with a relatively few incidents where other types of force were used. Moving on to the demographics of the subjects. As in past years, the vast majority of these incidents involved white men, somewhat smaller number of white females followed by black males and just a few individuals. There was no capacity in the records to indicate what his ethnic or racial identity was. And then this year, as was suggested by the Social Justice and Equity Commission, I started tracking the ages of the individuals. And that was one of the many really valuable pieces of input I got from the commission and understanding the types of questions that the community had about the data. So began tracking that age range, and you'll see the first number, those juveniles between 14 and 17, there were 7, which was a big increase. And I want to really focus on this. You can see from these numbers, first let me explain why it says 9. 7 were audited for 2023 and in 2023, but there were 2 more incidents involving juveniles very late in December that weren't sent my way for auditing until 2024. And I wanted to be able to really compare these numbers to previous years. And so I thought it was important to give the totally accurate number of incidents juveniles, which is 9. So as you can see, that's a really dramatic difference. And even the proportion of arrests involving force being, 9 out of 72. That's a very different type of proportion than, as you heard earlier, it's typically, 1.6% of all arrests overall involved uses of force. So that was deeply concerning and a subject of conversation throughout the year, something that I reported on in the mid-year and discussed with the chief. And as you've heard, we've kind of looked into where can you even get specialized training to really focus on what kinds of de-escalation needs and techniques need to be understood to effectively de-escalate with juveniles. So I'm very happy that they fully embraced finding those resources and that is underway. So I've already talked about this first trend being a big decrease. Another trend, similar to past years, the majority of these incidents involve people who were somewhat diminished, incapacitated by mental illness, some form of substance abuse, or some combination thereof. And that number, I want to refer to in 2022, that number was 72%. So it's a pretty big increase of that proportion. I think it's so important to get a really good sense of what is the population generally that is not amenable to the officer's directives to allow for a peaceable arrest. And so I think that's an important piece of data to really focus on. And another thing that I started tracking was the number of individuals that are clearly unhoused. And I said clearly because I'm certain that it's at least 33%. It could be higher. And this is not a piece of data that is systematically tracked by the officers. They're not required to. Oftentimes I would see in the records based on the person's address or lack thereof, or more importantly this year, being able to watch all the body-worn camera video. It was visible on videotapes that they were sleeping in cars and on the street or in some other form of temporary shelter. So again, I think it's really important to have as clear a sense as possible. What is the population that's most impacted by these dynamics? And then connected to that, what are the best ways to de-escalate peacefully? Turning to the misconduct complaints, there were 20 completed investigations. That includes, I believe it was 17 that came from the community and 3 that were initiated internally by the department. I determined that they all met the department's standards. Happy to report that there were no sustained complaints of excessive force or civil rights violations. There were 3 sustained complaints of unprofessional conduct. This is what in the past would have been deemed service level. These were very discrete incidents, generally involving unprofessional verbal conduct. Each of those officers did receive documented counseling warnings. And I also want to emphasize the enormous impact of this first year involving the full deployment of the body-worn camera video. Even in this relatively small data set of misconduct complaints, there were 5 where the body-worn camera video was determinative. In 4 of those cases, it was very clear from reviewing the video that the allegations were without any merit. And in one of the complaints, the body video really showed that the complaint was valid and it was sustained. That was just another place where we could see the enormous value of having video. So I want to sort of recap these really big developments. Talked about the first one, emphasizing this body-worn camera. Also kind of want to double click on what you heard about this being extremely time intensive, labor intensive, and emotionally draining work. And I think that that's an important thing to take into consideration in terms of police oversight moving forward. Talked about this rise in juvenile arrests. This is not specific to Olympia. This is something we're seeing throughout the region, and from various reporting appears to be kind of a nationwide concern. I don't think we have enough data to say we know for sure why there are such dramatically larger numbers of juveniles having contact with law enforcement. It's something everybody's very concerned about and looking to attend to. And then you heard from the deputy chief about eliminating that dated language in the complaints. And kind of piggybacking a little bit on your questions earlier about that, I absolutely, from my observations, would concur with the deputy chief that this change of language in the policy, I don't have any reason to think that changes anything operationally. One of the reasons I recommended that language be changed was because it didn't reflect the way the complaints are investigated. When something first comes in, first of all, a lot of times you don't have very much information, so it gets a category. The way it's investigated internally and certainly the way it's audited can morph over time as information is gathered, and in every situation it's given the utmost serious consideration. So calling something service level sometimes seemed really incongruous with the impact on the individuals who brought the complaint, and incongruous with the label. Something could involve something involving an allegation of discrimination, for an example, but be given service level or something. It just didn't fit, and I didn't think that it was appropriate for anyone to think there was a serious category and their complaint wasn't put in the category. So I'm very happy that the department enthusiastically made that change, as well as the policy changes, really emphasizing anti-discrimination. So moving on to the recommendations. The first recommendation, and this is detailed, all three of these are detailed much more in the report, but it's been observed that critical incidents can take a very long time to get all the way through the process. And once it's gone through processes by third parties that the city has no control over, and then the department does its critical incident review and a report is written, then it's delivered to the auditor. There's generally a lot to review, and so reaching an audit determination, we're finding it can take years. It seemed to me that it would at least help somewhat to have a bit of a change in the auditor's duties, or maybe there's some other way that the city could provide for reporting the auditor's determination more or less immediately or as soon as feasible, and then the city can make that determination public as opposed to waiting until the next auditor report. So if I complete one tomorrow, it wouldn't be reported on until early next year when I do the annual review for 2024. Mm-hmm. So I'm recommending that some mechanism be adopted that would allow for immediate reporting of those matters. Mm-hmm. The other, the second recommendation is about the way that the department, and this is really still in a rather exploratory phase, but the involvement, the presence, the decision-making around crew resources in these incidents involving force is not something that is readily observable in the current records. As I said, the vast majority of these situations involve individuals who are probably in some type of crisis where crew could arguably have a role. There are a multitude of considerations. And so I think it would be advisable to look at ways to systematically gather that data so we can learn from it. And then finally, the third recommendation is really just a reprisal of the recommendation I made in the mid-year report, which is that the current body-worn camera policy allows for officers to deactivate the audio when they are essentially speaking to one another about operational matters. Quite frequently, I'm watching the videos, and when officers are speaking to each other, not engaging with the public, I want to make sure that's clear. But it is an ongoing incident, and oftentimes, these are very dynamic incidents, and I don't know how they're communicating their perception of the circumstances while they're unfolding. And sometimes they're having conversations when an incident is essentially complete, the individual has been arrested. I think there would be potentially some value in understanding the officer's perceptions in that time. And I also don't know of any safety or public records reason why having that audio not be there should be permitted. So I've made this recommendation. The chief has, my understanding, directed the officers to employ that deactivation as seldom as possible. It should be a very rare event. This is a mandatory subject of bargaining. So I think when it comes to making policy changes, it's always important to recognize this could take some time. So I'm just going to renew my recommendation that that policy be changed. And meanwhile, the officers are very, very mindful of all the reasons that the audio deactivation poses challenges and certainly a hindrance to transparency and accountability, and urge that they do it rarely. Do you have any questions? Over there.
Thank you very much, Auditor Parker. Any questions or comments from council? Councilmember Vanderpool.
I'm fairly new at this, about this process. Could you give me essentially maybe a light rundown of how we would implement these recommendations? Who would it go through from process to process?
Obviously, such a good question and such a complicated. Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. The first one, I think, and I'm going to defer to the city manager. My understanding is that if the council agrees with that recommendation, the city manager could amend the auditor's duties and responsibilities to create this, or some other mechanism could be determined that would fulfill that reporting requirement. So I think that one, probably not too tricky. The second one regarding recording and tracking the crew involvement, I think is a matter for the chief and the city to think about ways in which that might be effectuated. And then the third, as I discussed, is a pretty significant policy change that will require mandatory bargaining. Am I still, still with you, okay.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Deputy Chief Costello.
Clarify a little bit. The recommendations that we see, we've discussed, we obviously knew they were coming. There's no formalized process for the implementation of them. because there's never been a question about whether or not we were going to do it or not. So we've never said no to one. We've had a little bit of trouble with the body-worn camera implementation. I'll reiterate her comments about mandatory subject of bargaining, and so I don't want to get too far into that, but the rest of them are easy. Some of it's just a data tracking thing that we can take care of. So I don't see any of them that we aren't going to pursue immediately. So.
Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you for bringing the report, Tara. First, I appreciate your recommendations, and I'm glad that we're working to implement them. I think especially that not waiting for the calendar year cycle to run through when there's a critical incident and there's so much community interest in having a third party's eyes on that incident. So I really appreciate that. And just a little bit of maybe it's for a parking lot, but I want to underscore my frustration about the length of time that an officer involved in a critical incident is off on leave. That I hope that as part of these changes in processes, we'll figure out a way where we can make an internal determination and allow that person to continue to work in some capacity. Because we've just relying on the outside independent agencies to finish their process has meant, people cooling their heels for a year. And that's just not reasonable. So. Is that, are you seeing other departments, Tara, that are finding a way to deal with that length of time it takes the independent evaluation?
Well, Councilman, first of all, luckily the number of critical incidents is so rare. And everybody wants them to never happen. From what I've observed, the long periods of time with multiple third-party reviews is something that every jurisdiction struggles with. And sadly, I'm not aware of anybody or any jurisdiction that has come up with a quicker way to conduct these types of reviews through all their very multiple levels. So I'd certainly love to hear it if somebody else knows about it.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to elevate that concern while we're having this conversation. My other, I know that Ms. Chan's going to bring up again the disproportionate, both the increase in juvenile arrests and the higher rate of use of force. I'm wondering whether either in your study or with the department's crime analyst, are we looking at, are these 72 arrests, is this 72 different people, or is this 3 people 30 times? I think because we would respond in a different way, whether we've got to work something out with a frequent customer, or it's a pattern of, like some of our news reports of folks coming from somewhere else in the region in a stolen car and heading in to rob the same store that they just robbed in 3 strip malls up and down I-5. I don't know whether that's within your purview or whether that's our crime analyst or our leadership team at OPD, but I just think that's something that will help, is to understand who they are rather than jumping to the conclusion that we're grabbing random teenagers across town. Right?
But certainly, I asked the chief the same questions, and the city's crime analyst and the chief, had already been really digging into that data and shared it with me. I don't have it in front of me, and I don't want to misspeak as to those details. One thing that really jumped out was that, no, it's not the same small number of juveniles over and over. It's a good number of, different juveniles. Many are not from Olympia, but coming into Olympia, oftentimes in stolen vehicles from places like Tacoma and Seattle. And a significant, I'm not sure, maybe Deputy Chief Costello would be a better person to speak to this, but crimes involving weapons, more violent assault types of crimes. So, but the department is certainly tracking that, and I don't know what the arrest data with juveniles has been. I plan to ask for that soon in 2024, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. But so far in 2024, there have only been 2 involving juveniles where force was used. So maybe 2023 there was something that is dissipating now. I don't know, but we're definitely digging into that data with fine-tooth comb.
I don't have a lot to add other than I would second that they're different. For the most part, they're different individuals that are having force used against them. I would also reiterate, I would remind you of the discussion we had about retail theft that turns into robbery and thus then often turns into uses of force. And we do see an uptick in people involved in those things that are not necessarily a part of our community all the time. So.
Thank you both. I didn't mean to belabor that, and I understand that of almost 60,000 calls, that's 70 incidents or whatever. I mean, but it is scary, and it's threatening to our community. So I appreciate you're looking at that, and I'll yield the time.
Any additional questions from the dais? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
I know I told the mayor I was going to wait on this. Because you're already there, and we're already talking about really looking at, whether it's 72 or hopefully a lower number next year, but really uncovering like who are these young people, right, or whatever that. And if we have issues in other areas and not just juveniles, but really unpacking beyond race, right? And I really don't want to get ahead of you, Genevieve, but in the Social Justice and Equity Commission's letter, what is it? It's on the bottom of the first page, but it's the first one. It says the increase in juvenile arrests compared to 2022 was a key trend identified by the auditor. If available, the Commission would like to see additional information shared in future reports on juvenile arrests, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, LGBTQ+, substance abuse, mental health status, neurodivergence, and housing status to see if these are compounding factors. So I read that because not everyone here has seen the letter. And also I wonder some of this information we might just not know about someone, but how much information do we currently collect?
There's a good deal of what is written there that is difficult to
Absolutely.
difficult
and some
to
that
gather.
We maybe shouldn't ask for.
Yeah, and I think we've had this discussion in different ways about demographics and the collecting of data and things like that. So a lot of that stuff is going to be difficult for us to ascertain unless it is obvious externally when someone presents themselves. For me, from an operations administration perspective, I would like to see another year and see, are we high again? I mean, we all have seen statistics where you just kind of have a flyer. And I'm certainly not suggesting that's what we have because I don't want to discount it as that. But I would like to see another year and try to get some more concrete statistics to see if indeed there's something going on, because it is perplexing. There is no common theme. And so it is a very difficult thing for us to figure out. So that's the first thing we'd like to see. And the second thing we'd like to do is engage in some training with regard to de-escalation and see if we can decrease that number and see if we can have a positive impact on it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's reasonable. And I will give Genevieve her time. She'll share. But I appreciate the wanting to look maybe broader and identify if there's any themes, underlying factors, and though. Also, if there's a liability, I think that comes with collecting this type of information, and there is some privacy issues involved. And so, of course, there's only the best intentions on our Social Justice and Equity Commission, but oftentimes when you're collecting so much information about people, I would want to know, what are we doing with it, right? So anyways, thank you.
I do have a question about the audio, the deactivation policy when it comes to the body-worn cameras. So just a clarifying question. So although it's not explicit in policy, our department leadership encouraging our officers to leave their audio on during these interactions?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're actively seeking to change the policy to codify that.
Okay, thank you. In regards to the juvenile arrest, I heard that. Sorry. In regards to the juvenile arrest, I am curious if we have looked closely at other jurisdictions, since you said that there are several of them that are arrested are actually not from Olympia and from other areas. So are we comparing that data to other communities as well to see if they are dealing with something similar and if their rates of arrests look similar or maybe even higher than ours? Is there a broader trend in this regard regionally, or is this something unique to our community?
I'm going to say I'll get back to you on that, and I'm also going to say that anecdotally, I'd say it's up everywhere. But I can get you some specific numbers of comparable cities, size-wise and demographically.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Tara, Debbie, and I have meet every once in a while and have been working on this, so I just want everyone to have all the information. I think that we'll keep on. I mean, we talked about in the public hearing was about body-worn camera footage, right? And so, just in case it wasn't clear to folks, Tara, I wonder if you could share why would someone turn off their camera, right? And it's not. I think it's easy to kind of jump to like, oh, it's for nefarious reasons, but right, they could also just be having lunch. They could be taking a phone call about insurance or plumbing at their house, right? And so if you could just kind of share a little bit about that, I think that would be great. A little bit of our conversation, because that was really curious to me as well when we were checking in about it, as well as how, there can be an error. Sometimes you forget to turn it back on. But anyways, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying, I don't want them to deactivate the audio because I don't want to read people's minds and speculate about why they've deactivated it. Mm-hmm. But in watching these videos and using my experience and common sense, my observation is you have shifts coming and going and people getting updated about how a scene is unfolding and what the plans are. And they're communicating that to each other. And sometimes you have newer officers who are receiving training. There are all sorts of decisions and discussions that could be material to understanding whether or not best practices were employed before that use of force, because this is all, pretty much all pre-use of force. So it's of interest to me as an auditor, but I certainly understand on a human level why, when they're not engaged with members of the public, it would not appear to them that they were eliminating any information when they deactivate their audio. And I think part of that's just learning about the value of the transparency and accountability value of both the body-worn camera and having an auditor. That's my speculation and observation. Deputy Chief Costello might have other ideas about why it might seem like a good idea to mute your camera at any given time.
I've lost hours of my life to this discussion. I would, I guess, ask you to sort of envision your day-to-day work and having a camera on in every interaction where you were doing something related to your job. The policy says when you're engaged in law enforcement activity. That's a very broad, easily interpretable situation. And so if we have someone that's conducting traffic enforcement or traffic control on a scene where, let's say you have a structure fire and you're directing traffic, but you have your patrol car out there and you're sitting in it for 4 hours, you're conducting law enforcement activity, and our expectation is that you have the camera on and the audio on. But you may be talking on the phone, you may be answering a text message, you may, like, there's any number of things that you could be doing that I think there's some concern on the part of the employees that they just want a little bit more freedom. I don't believe that they're trying to hide anything. I think that they want that discretion to be able to train, to be able to have some personal discussions, things like that. And so it's weighing out the public interest versus sort of the privacy needs of the employees as they go through their day. And it's just a tough thing, and we're working through it.
Councilmember Gilman.
I know you've already spent a lot of your prime years in this conversation, but I just want to consider for a minute that the way that we have the cameras activated, when they're activated when you turn your lights and siren on, they're activated if you draw your weapon or your taser. We've set up a situation where we sort of defined these are recorded moments. And so to say that that's an override in case you have it off, but you should generally always have it on, is different instructions to people. So I just hope that we'll consider sort of how we've programmed the equipment and how we've explained to people when it gets turned on automatically as we're working with our employees to encourage them to allow the recording to run more of the time. That's, anyhow, because that was my understanding, was I heard about each of the ways that it's automatically turned on, and I thought, well, there you go. But I can hear from this conversation the value of hearing what led up to an incident and not just the moment the lights came on or a weapon was drawn. So.
Yeah, it's very difficult for us and for the officers to determine what is going to be germane in the future when people are looking back at it, or what's going to happen 30 seconds from now. It's a very difficult thing to predict. And so I guess what I would just like to reiterate as we have this discussion is just the video is not turning off. It's just the audio. So there is still a recording of what's occurring. You may just not hear the officers' voices. And I agree. We do need to sort of clean that up. We need to get our policy in order. It's just going to take some time, but we understand the desire. We're just trying to figure out the balance a little bit. So.
I actually do have a question in regards to the complaints of unprofessional conduct process. So I believe that we talked about, how community members can file complaints, and I'm just curious, I can't recall if we had a discussion about potential language barriers involved with that process. So do we have a means for people to have our complaint process translated into other languages for them to file those complaints?
So Assistant City Manager Sullivan, I think we did have that conversation with the Social Justice and Equity Committee as we were going through oversight. And so I know it's on the radar. If you wanted to file a complaint, we would obviously have the ability to do that because we need that just in day-to-day operations. So we'd have the language line and try to explain that. But as far as the ability to do it on the website or other interactive ways, we're working on it. It's on the radar. It's not lost on us that that's a thing that we need to work on. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
So thank you for that. I would like to bring up Genevieve Chan, co-chair of the Social Justice and Equity Commission.
Good evening. Just for clarification, my name is Genevieve Canseco Chan. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the chairs of the Social Justice and Equity Commission. I just wanted to share, again, very thankful for the opportunity to have worked with the police auditor and OPD and putting together a review of the auditor's report this year. I think for us, it was very edifying to understand more the role and scope of the police auditor, as well as to understand what OPD has to do on a daily basis, and in particular in understanding a little bit more the use of force. I think this helps our commission understand in terms of what we're recommending in the forthcoming civilian oversight of law enforcement recommendations, and also just to understand the existing system as it is. So I just want to extend my thanks again on behalf of the commission. A couple of things that we've already discussed, many of the things that were in our letter to Mayor Payne and to City Council, but for those who haven't read the letter, again, that highlighting that interest in the increase in juvenile arrests, and we understand and appreciate that we can't capture all of the demographic information at the time of an incident, but wanting to just be mindful and thinking about if there is opportunity to look at aggregate data or data that or factors that may correlate to some of these incidences, right? And maybe that'll come out in terms of the de-escalation training with youth. Maybe there will be some things that we'll see in training that would address some of these issues regarding dealing with youth that may be experiencing houselessness, or just individuals also experiencing crisis. So hopefully, while we know that the ability to potentially have all that demographic information is not necessarily realistic, that we still strive to try to have a better understanding of what might be happening in those incidences. The other area that we thought was of particular interest was that sort of understanding the use of force when there are people experiencing crisis. So again, you're really looking at how the OPD will be training individuals, training our officers with that, and to also underscore again, understanding when we engage a crisis response unit, if that could be clarified and shared a little bit more. I think that'll help not only the community, but also to understand a little bit more when those two entities engage and help address community needs. And again, just to sort of, I feel like I'm a broken record. I'm repeating a lot of the things, but again, just concurring with Tara Parker's recommendations regarding the frequency of expediting or the need to expedite civilian audits. Really hope that, again, the fact that we're recommending a community board that would meet more frequently with the auditor, hopefully that will also be able to kind of address those long lapses or be able to create a process in which we can request sort of those expedited reports out to the community. I think again that we hope that will allow this idea of building more trust with the community, that we are working as best we can to share reports and increase that sense of transparency. Trying to think. The other thing, I think one of the things I also just wanted to point out was it was a wonderful way an opportunity to potentially model what a community board would do with the police auditor. And one of the things that we wanted to say that we thought it was really helpful to be able to have these recommendations and findings from the auditor before they were submitted to OPD, just so we understand what was the auditor looking at, what were some of the findings that they were uncovering, and then bring that community perspective to it before submitting it to OPD. And then also wanting this to really, we thought it would be beneficial to have these community board meetings with the civilian police auditor in person. Just again, there's so many things that transpire in an in-person conversation that you might not be able to do in a Zoom or a remote setting. Even just some of the dialogue that we're having today reflects what could be going on in those meetings that is be so much more edifying, and we could learn a lot just in those kinds of conversations. Overall, I think that it was a really important experience for us to have this opportunity to work very closely with Deputy Chief Costello, with OPD, and then the police auditor. So thank you for that opportunity, and let me know if you have any other questions.
Thank you very much, Genevieve. Any questions from council? Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you for the ongoing work and for the extra work of putting this letter together. It was really a helpful guide to looking at the auditor's report. What comes to me when you're asking, like, I know it's, these are brief, intense incidents where sort of everybody's in crisis during the incident. And so the challenge of recording some of the demographics or knowing what somebody's backstory is I think is going to continue to be problematic. But I appreciate your call for like de-escalation training that's specific to youth and young adults, that and also just the recognition that folks might be in crisis. It looks like from our statistics, 85% of the time, either substance or mental health. What it provokes in me, and I hope that your commission can consider, is we were proud a few years ago of making a pivot from warrior to guardians as a police force. And I guess the question is, are we guardian of everybody who we interact with, or are there some people who are still a threat? And how is that line determined? I think that's the tension of this. How do you use de-escalation? How are you compassionate? Is also, when does it switch to threat assessment and demanding compliance? Anyhow, so that's what I'm thinking about from reading your letter, is how far does our guardian model extend? Does it include everybody in the community, most people unless they're having a crisis? I just saw it. That's what it made me think about.
It's a challenging question. I think, again, like I think that's what one of the questions that we as a commissioner are also asking ourselves, especially as you know, we recently received a report on experience of discrimination that we're still unpacking, and that's going to be a question that will also kind of be an overarching theme when we look at that data and when we think about recommendations back to you. When do we need to, is there a threshold for that guardianship? And at the same time, when there are people such as our first responders that are in those moments, how do we understand, how can we help assist them, go through a checklist of some sort to be able to prioritize? Is this a person that meets that threshold, or is this an incident that exceeds that threshold? So I think this is an ongoing conversation, and I hope that just these ongoing dialogues and even asking that question will help us keep improving the way that we approach these incidences.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. And just thank you, Genevieve, to you and the commission. If you could pass that along, the amount of work that you're doing for our city is like maybe more than the planning commission. Like, I mean, it's a lot, and it's meaningful, and you've quickly become a trusted ally of the city council and I think the police department and all the other places that you're working. So thank you for that. And I think keep up the good work is really what I want to say. I had another thought that was brilliant, and it went away. So maybe it will come back. But really, thank you is the thing I wanted to pass along.
Thank you. I just want to echo Councilmember Gilman, what your anecdote earlier. I think the same from me as we've been doing this work and meeting more and more individuals, the OPD and the auditor, and then the special subcommittees around the civilian oversight for law enforcement. I think everyone genuinely wants us to be a better city, and everybody at all levels is really trying to see this with new eyes. So thank you again for helping us keep this going forward.
Yes, thank you, Genevieve, and well said, Councilmember Cooper. I just want to thank you, first of all, for the letter to the council. And I think that your work is quite extensive, as Councilmember Cooper pointed out, and really is sort of it's a preview of what this work will look like in the event that we have a community oversight law enforcement board. So in some ways, the Social Justice and Equity Commission is sort of working hand in hand with the police auditor in the way that we envision that working with the Civilian Oversight Board. And so I just want to thank you for sort of laying the foundation for what we hope this process will look like in the future. We can't take for granted that that we have this great interaction between our police auditor and the Social Justice and Equity Commission, both here to present to us on recommendations where they are aligned. And I don't think that we can take that for granted, because there are certainly communities where that may not be the case, or maybe in our own community at some point in the future that may not be the case. And so I just want to acknowledge all of the great work that has brought us to this point as well. And thank you for being here tonight. And yes, please pass along our gratitude to the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to item 6B, which is a briefing on the city's employee resource groups. And here to present this evening is Kelly Drake, the city's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. For the record, I'm Kelly Drake, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Coordinator for the City of Olympia. I'm also at the end of my allergy medicine effectiveness, so I apologize for the hoarseness and the coughing and sneezing that might ensue. On a light note, and a really exciting note, I'm here to tell you about the formations of employee resource groups of the City of Olympia for our workforce. So I want to go over this briefly. What are employee resource groups? They're voluntary employee-led groups brought together by a community with shared identities or interests. They provide support in personal and career development, and kind of can tackle citywide challenges that relate to those groups. They create opportunities for relationship building, mentorship, mentoring, and creating a better workplace and work environment, retention, and engagement. Why ERGs in the work that I'm doing? My biggest reason, I think, for them is because I saw a need, and it was kind of an easy thing to fill that need. It also helps to build capacity for the work that I'm doing with the workforce. It gives voice to people who are part of historically underrepresented groups in the workforce. It allows groups to air grievances as well as access professional development and resources. It provides a forum in the workforce where members can meet to discuss and address workplace issues, and it's a safe place to connect with others who may understand their experience. The business case for the ERGs and the hyperlinked in the parentheses are just the links from where this information came from. It makes the work environment more diverse and better for everyone. It creates a safe place for workers. It works to attract the best talent for employment. It improves morale, improves engagement, improves belonging, and improves retention. It promotes external impact. It builds community across the city, and it creates greater innovation. How the ERGs support the work to update Olympia 2045. This information is on our website. In our equity section, we have this goal of envisioning a future where Olympia has a diverse and inclusive community, and how the ERGs show the city's commitment to a diverse and inclusive community and support our multicultural arts and heritage presence. Under public participation and partners, we have this vision of, through collaborative and open discussions, Olympians embrace a shared responsibility to make our community a better place. And ERGs provide one way the city is demonstrating a commitment to collaboration, participation, and partnership. Under Parks, Arts, and Recreation, we have a vision of a healthy, fun, welcoming, and enriching place to live for all Olympians. ERGs provide one source of feedback and ideas to achieve this vision, so we can be a go-to, and ERGs can be tapped for information. Under the economy, that we're afforded equality of lifelong opportunities that build pathways to upward mobility and financial stability. And ERGs help the city to be more inclusive and innovative in some of its challenges and issues around this. Under the guise of public services, we have a vision of responsive services and affordable housing for all. and ERGs can be utilized to realize barriers and bridges to achieve this vision. What ERGs are, what ERGs do we have at the city? We launched our first ERG in February of this year, the Staff of Color Employee Resource Group, which is going to be renamed something awesome, I was told. And then the women's group relaunched in March of this year. LGBTQIA2S plus group, which is also going to have an awesome name, hopefully after tomorrow's meeting, launched on April 3rd. And finally, the disability group launched on May 8th, 2024. We have members, co-leads, and executive sponsors in the room from all 4 of these groups. So what happens at an ERG? It's really up to the ERG what they want to really see because it is led by them. An ERG decides their scope and desired outcomes. They decide who they are, how, when, where they meet, and what they do. Some of the things they might get involved in the workplace are volunteering, so they might become volunteer forces for some of our culture events, for cleanup activities, or anything else that they may want to do. Health and wellness, social connection interdepartmentally. So this is one way that I've heard over and over again in the equity strategic planning meetings that we want to kind of break down the silos between different work teams and different departments, and ERGs are a way that accomplishes that. Taking on city workforce and community issues, policy practice and process changes or development in some cases, staff development, building morale and capacity for employee engagement, retention, and recognition. ERG leadership and support. So ERG leaders meet quarterly to learn and know and grow from each other. It builds a sense of sustainability as well, so that they bring issues up and then we find ways to kind of talk about them as a group and a whole. It also allows us to kind of find the intersections between the group, because as we know, humans are unique, and some of the people in our workforce can actually attend every single one of the ERGs, but it might not be plausible in their work week. So we can find ways to kind of meet those intersections as well. There's a support and standardized process, which starts with contacting me if somebody's interested in another ERG or has an idea. Then we find an executive sponsor, and we kind of do different things for every one of these 4 to find the executive sponsor and the leads for them. And then I support the ERGs and the ERG leadership team on what their needs are, and so I'm kind of the workhorse behind the scenes. That's it. Questions? I did it really fast, I know.
Any questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Hey, thank you so much. You're not sort of the workhorse, you are.
Yeah.
This is something that I've been looking forward to this presentation. I think it's a really great thing for a lot of reasons. And you've also, not without a team of people certainly, but you've also been able to make this happen in kind of a short amount of time.
Right.
Which is very, there's a lot of moving pieces to this. Getting the executive sponsorship, people involved, there's just a lot. I was privileged to be able to attend the women's kickoff one, and I was just floored. I mean, I think we had almost all of these seats on both sides here full, you know? And we barely get that here, right? So, it's just, and there was just a real feeling, we're also on the all-staff list from different levels of leadership, that this was really truly supported, and that there were going to be active executive sponsors, because I think it's easy to say, yeah, I support this. Let me sign off one time and never show up, right? I just think this is really exciting. I do wonder, what is the sort of process for, what do you envision? What is the capacity? We're probably not going to have like 15 ERGs, I would say. So what is the process of starting one, and how do we? What do you foresee to kind of put the guardrails on it, right?
Right.
To make sure that that the workhorse isn't completely burnt out, and everyone else. But
Right.
yeah, so if you could just talk about that, that'd be great.
Right, or if you run out of executive sponsors, right? So we'll increase the executive team. So I think the process really is if you have a desire or need, or if we hear that there's some gap missing, and people want that space to kind of gather, to have kind of the community pieces to it, they can inquire about any of them. Currently, I have some interest in a veterans ERG group, and then another interest in a spirituality one as well, or a faith. And so those ones are sitting out there kind of percolating a little bit, but it's like, but if there's really truly a movement in that direction, let's do it. Let's set it up and get it going. Sorry. I sound so much like a seal after 8 p.m., so I apologize. And then we find the executive sponsor. We have some conversations. Sometimes there's one identified. And some come with leaders and some don't. The Staff of Color one was started. Kelly was the executive sponsor for that one. And we walked into the room and asked for leadership. And leadership showed up, right? And so it depends on each individual group about like how we're going to walk into that work. We've done some surveys pre-launching those, like, is there an interest? Would you come to this? What would that look like? We've taken leaps of faith with the women's group. We knew there was strong interest. There was a very strong women's group before. It kind of slowly went away, and so the relaunch was what you saw when you came that day. We currently have about 150 employees involved in the employee resource groups. Wow. And that's just, and it seems that the attendance and the memberships of those continue to rise with each meeting. Mm-hmm. Does that help? I think, does that answer everything?
Yes, that's very impressive numbers.
Councilmember Gilman.
Thanks. Kelly, I'm wondering about resources dedicated to this. My experience with committees and boards is that if there's some admin support to do reminders and structure the meetings happening, that they're more successful. So I'm wondering if there's any administrative support for helping to get the word out, and if there's a budget for snacks.
Those are great questions. So I'm a social worker, so if we don't have the resources, we will find them. It's just built into how and who I am. The admin part comes from the groups themselves. I do the part of it where I kind of link with everybody, so I'm in charge of that, my own admin there as well. But the co-leads or the leads of the groups and the members themselves can share that responsibility. When we launched each one of the ERG as part of the 4-part thing, like what part of this are you interested in? Administrative is one of those, so we're identifying that right in the beginning. And some people really have a knack and a desire, and that's what they're really good at and kind of walk into. As for budgets, right now my budget's really thin. I had $5,000 to dedicate to ERGs, and now it's 4 ERGs for the year. However, I've been working on a couple of different avenues within the city. Paul Simmons oversees the Wellness Committee, and there's money available as well there. We're developing it together a form to request funding from the Wellness Committee. The other thing that I'm sort of having conversations about, not even super well fleshed out, so I apologize if I say something I probably might not. But I know that we've created 501c3s here in the city through Community Chest. And there's been some interest in the ERGs, like, can we do that so we can raise our own money? And so they're kind of taking ownership of the groups as well to do that. So those are some of the resources we're looking at. Great. And potlucks.
Wonderful. And if I might follow up, I just want to make sure that if there are additional supports or resources that we can help to marshal, that we could be there. And so I'm wondering, are those leads able to use work time to get the word out and organize the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Jay Birdie fully supports, explicitly has fully supported. It's on all the flyers.
City manager says okay. Good.
City manager says okay.
Any other comments from council? Yeah. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. Thank you. This is great. I would like to work here.
Oh, good. We have job openings.
I was curious kind of more about non-cultural affinities. So like in my day job, I know that like a lot of large corporations have affinity groups like around people who take care of their parents or single parents with children. Is there a conversation about that type of affinity?
There has been a little bit of discussion around that. The women's group definitely has a couple of subgroups that are discussing that, especially around parenting and single parenting. There's this capacity piece, right? Difference between affinity and an employee resource group is really to be a resource for the city as well. And there are great conversations that come out of that. So trying to figure out what might sit in as an employee resource group and what might be considered a wellness group, because we have a wellness committee that can also have subgroups. And so helping to find the right avenue for that is what I think that it is going to be part of this year as well.
Yeah, it sounds like the reason you're here.
Yeah, one of.
Cool, thank you,
Yeah.
I appreciate the learning.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Just piggybacking, I think it would be helpful for Councilmember Cooper's inquiry. Could you just, the Women's Commission is a great, or sorry, it's not a commission. The Women's Employee Resource Group is a great example. Could you talk about the subgroups? Because I was kind of floored at like how broad reaching it was. And then sort of talking, because it's not just people coming together talking about women's stuff, you know? So yeah, so if you could just kind of talk about this methodology behind here's this group and then here's these subs, right?
I might ask for some help discussion of that from the executive sponsor. I'm going to do my best, but maybe you can support that as well. And so each group, like each employee resource group, does it a little bit differently. And so for the women's group, there's kind of a decentralized leadership. There's leaderships of the subgroup. So it's definitely my largest ERG when it comes to the ERG leadership meetings. It has an executive sponsor, and then it has subgroups that each have a woman leader. And we have an arts and crafts one. We have a cooking one. We have a book club and a podcast review or podcast club. There's a fishing group where we're going to have a woman fly fisher person here to teach us some of the ins and outs of that. What am I missing? Neurodivergence. Thank you. So there's a number of subgroups.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good flavor, and I think those are going to continue to grow.
Right.
As interests get shared within the groups. I mean, as Kelly's mentioned, all these groups are just now starting up, and I think the world of possibility here for what they can get engaged in that not just meets their interests, but meets interests that others in the community are going to see as well. So I just think there's just a world here of possibilities.
Absolutely.
I do want to add to it because, am I on? No. Okay, I want to add to it because when we got together and we said, what do we want these subgroups to be? Some of the subgroups had to do with issues that they were working on, that they were wrestling with, that they wanted support for, whether it was wellness, whether it was neurodivergence, a book club to look at, you know, how to be a woman in this environment. Same with the podcast, the topics that they take on. Others were really looking for connections, social connections with each other. Hence fishing, cooking, you know, making that connection with each other around something that they love to do. So that's really was the genesis of that. And as executive sponsor, I said, go for it. So.
And there is a single parenting one, and that's fun as well. I will say that in the women's group.
I'm going to quit touching this microphone. The other thing that I want to talk about in this, there's a couple of things that Kelly's touched on, and post-COVID, you know, we've heard a lot through even the equity work that Kelly has done, the survey work with our employees, that there's this loss of connectivity that happened when we all went home. And then a lot of our workforce still works from home. We've changed the way we do business in the city. That's not common just to us. That's across workforces. COVID has changed us in that way. And what our employees are feeling, although those employees that get to work from home love that, they're missing their connectivity, their opportunity to interact with their coworkers. And that was affecting our morale. And so this is a way that gets at that interconnectivity and helps build morale in a different way than just coming together to do work together, but coming together as people together and sharing common interests. And I think we miss that sometimes too often in how we work together is so commingled with who we are as individuals and how we see the world. And getting a chance to see the world with a group of like-minded individuals in a more close-up fashion is going to make us better policymakers as an executive team. It's going to help our human resources department bring those recommendations to our organizational health teams. And so all this is going to build, you know, there's our Belonging and Equity Action Team that Kelly hasn't even talked about in this conversation that links into this work as well. So there's a lot of pieces, and here's where I want to end my comments. I want to thank the council. I came to you in 2020 asking for resources for us to do equity work, and you overwhelmingly said yes. And then we came back to you, I think in 2021, and said we need a couple more, and the council said yes. So we're here because of the work of Kelly and with our employees, but I just want to thank the council for your investment here, because you've allowed this to happen with us, and I just want to say that out loud and thank you for that.
And thank you to our Equity Award-winning city manager, Jay Burney. Any other comments from council? So I had the opportunity to come to the kickoff meeting of the LGBTQ 2S plus, IA 2S plus ERG kickoff a few weeks back, and I just wanted to thank everybody who was a part of that initial discussion, and for allowing me to stick around and sort of hear your conversation. And there was a lot of levity in the room, and it was great to see that, and I think that speaks very well to the city manager's point about what this is about, because it gets at when we say diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, right? When we come to City Hall, we don't shed who we are at the door. It's an opportunity for people to authentically share who they are with the people that they're working with every day. And on that point, I do want to mention that for anyone who might be listening, and looking at the kinds of groups that we have, that this is not segregated groups. If you are not part of this demographic, you are permitted to attend as an ally and participate in these employee resource groups as well. And so I just wanted to make that clear also. And really, I just want to say congratulations. This is, you kicked off 4 ERGs.
Well, others did most of the work.
Yeah. And it's the 5th month of the year.
Right.
So that's a big undertaking, and job well done, and congratulations to everyone. And 150 participants says there's a lot of excitement and increased demand for what you've created. So keep going.
Yep, I will. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night. All right, so that concludes our official business for this evening. So we will move on to council reports. I'll begin with the mayor's report, just very briefly. I just wanted to talk about how beautiful this weekend was. The weather was beautiful, and I participated in the kickoff of the opening day for boating season at the yacht club, and so I joined that ceremony, and then went to participate in the wooden boat fair, where I spent about 2 hours on just talking to the various boat owners and their wooden boats, those who are local and those who come to Olympia particularly at this time of year to participate in our festival. And then I had the opportunity of handing out the Mayor's Choice Award the following day at the breakfast on my favorite wooden boat. So it was really, really cool, and it just reminded me of the presentation we received a few weeks ago in Community Livability and Public Safety on how downtown is almost bouncing back to 2019 levels, and we've had over 3 million visits last year, and it was very evident after this weekend that we are back and very excited for what's to come. And I'll, Mayor Pro Tem Lynn.
You're going to tell us what boat it was, right? And was it a boat from Olympia?
Yes, it actually was a boat from Olympia. So, yes, thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name because it's actually a foreign name. But these people are, they are obviously here in Olympia, and their boat is from the 1960s. And they have completely restored this boat after several years of just working on this and turning it around. And so it's been a complete restoration project. But the reasons I selected it is because of the fact that I loved how they put some contemporary elements to it, and they respected the historical elements of the boat. And they blended it together so beautifully. And so I chose them because, one, they were welcoming. As soon as they saw me, they said, come on board. And the boat is named after the wife of this lovely couple who is just an incredible participants in this, and they have owned the boat for over 30 years, and that was a wonderful story to hear. And I could tell you there were other stories of other boats. There was one boat that had been through several incidents, and this boat is still alive. I'm like, it should have been called 9 Lives or something. So it was very hard to choose which boat in the end. But I will get you that name of that boat because I don't have it in front of me. Oh yeah, and the picture. You know, it was just a wonderful weekend of celebrating the Wooden Boat Festival. And that reminds me that there is this, we heard about this incredible school, Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building at Port Hadlock, Washington. Super cool to see, you know, what they've been able to do with that program and enroll students that participate, including working on the various mechanical and electric aspects of these boats as well. And so they've stood up an entire program that supports those efforts as well. And so I'm very much looking forward to going back and picking another boat next year. And I'll start to my left, Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. The mayor's notes on wooden boats. That should be a podcast episode. With pictures, of course.
Hey, I got asked.
You did, yes. No, it was really good. And I want to agree with you that we're doing way better than we were in 2019 as far as a community coming out for events. And it's really great to see everyone out. Just one item for me, and that's the mayor and Councilmember Parsley and myself met this week to constitute the Bended Fork Committee. If you remember that from the December meeting last year upstairs, where we selected a committee to try to move forward the process on 108 State Avenue, the former City Hall and fire station. And so the committee met, and we heard from the hotel respondent, and then our next meeting we will get together and hear from the museum respondents, and then have a discussion about how to move forward. We just decided that, well, after some encouragement from one of the respondents, we caved actually to do the right thing and bring them in to tell us about their proposals so that we could hear it from their mouths and not just from their written words. And so those are really great, and look forward to the second one. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of months we come forward with a conversation for the full council about which way to go. Or not which way, where. It's probably a better way to say that. So, and then just a personal note, since I'm on that committee, it would be really cool if we could figure out a way to put the fire bell back on that building before we figure out the next use. So I'm saying it out loud on public now, and everywhere I go talking about fire stations. So it used to ring that bell that sits in front of the headquarters fire station on the ground to call the volunteer firefighters down to the fire station. And then later rang it in the morning, midday, and in the evening. And it would be a great addition to the whistle. That's my report.
Thanks. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Cooper? Councilmember Vanderpool.
You can actually hear the whistle from in this room. The last week I was sitting here. I didn't mention this in last week's report, but you can actually hear it from here. And I can hear it all up the west side in certain spots. So I'm wondering how far, if they go off at the same time, if people are going to get on the internet and be like, what's going on, yada, yada, about what's these sounds coming. Anyway, just...
Well, and for my house, I can hear it when they blow the original at the up at the valley. So you get both.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
On the note of sounds, the former Fishtail Brewing, now Ilk Brewing, I believe, the whistle is back. So that's pretty exciting. Anyways, yeah, we got to gather all these things, including the golden gavel that I think we're still looking into, and then we'll just plop him in one area and create a labyrinth. Stick all the council members in there. No, I just... Did you just get the visual? Yeah. I just wanted to lift up one event that I had an opportunity to attend, which was the second Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander celebration. Last year was at the Olympia Center, and then this year, South Puget Sound Community College, the Lacey campus, was kind to work with us and offer that space. And boy, was it such an exciting event. It has really grown even from the initial year being last year. There was just so many rooms full of people, lots of beautiful, I don't want to call them costumes, but really lovely outfits, all cultural outfits inspired, and then also just really colorful ones. And I haven't seen a lot of color like that in a long time. No pun intended. And it was also like really great to see it was great to see a lot of NHPI folks gathered in one space. It's when I see that, I feel like it's like a hug. So I felt that day. And also, this is a lot of work on behalf of Olivia Salazar-Dubrow and then also more and the Parks team, right? Our Parks, Arts, and Recreation team. And it's so great that Olivia now has a staff member, Rachel, I forget Rachel's last name. Rachel Meir, that's right, thank you. So just really, really great work and partnership with Lynn Crowley and Brian Locke and team over at the Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, or APIC. And also, I was really pleasantly surprised to see so much city staff there, and particularly city leadership there. We saw our city manager, assistant city manager Sullivan, and then also Manny, our new HR director. You'd already spent your whole birthday night with us at a council meeting, but you showed up, and you didn't have to, and you showed up to that event. And there were also many others, and it was just it was so lovely, and I hope it happens again, and it keeps on building momentum year after year, and you can tell for the folks that were there to perform, and there was just like, oh my gosh, it was a packed agenda of different types of performances. There was a bunch of different types of dancing, some singing, arts and crafts going off in different rooms, you name it. And the folks that were there to perform or to offer some sort of skill or talent they had, you could tell how much it meant to them too. So it wasn't just for the people watching, but it was also for an opportunity for people to practice something and showcase their talents, right, and be in community. So I just, can't say enough good things about that. So really, really great work from our staff team.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen? Yes, I also made it a point to swing by there after that, after the Wooden Boat Festival on Saturday. So, Councilmember Gilman.
All right. I'm going to report without all the bells and whistles. Hi. Yep. Intercity Transit had an all-day retreat on Friday. The intent was to reaffirm the 9 promises that we'd made in passing Proposition 1 and in making our plans to reimagine transit. And the positioning for the conversation was very much in line with the presentations we've had this evening, that if there's one thing we learned coming out of the pandemic, it's that we need to focus on equity, which for this conversation meant who truly depends on transit and how do we serve their needs. One interesting observation is that while there's more activity, there's no longer any way to differentiate the days of the week. Sunday isn't any different than Wednesday, and Monday isn't any different than Saturday at this point in how people move around when they move around. So initially we were looking at the college campus model and thinking, well, nobody comes on Monday or Friday, but they go to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And at this point, that's just not really clear anymore. So the focus has been on expanding weekend service, expanding evening service, and extending routes, and taking some of the focus away from longer commute sorts of runs. They're just, that's not coming back at all at this point. Even though I say that, we just implemented a few more of the 620 buses up to the 512 Lakewood Park and Ride as of last week. So it was really helpful. And then just to give you an image of the retreat, I had us put all of the executive staff and the board mixed together in one big circle, figuring that these are discussions that we needed to all participate in. And we started it off hearing from every voice in the room and kept it a conversation across the workday. And I think that made a stronger outcome, and I'm hoping to be reporting about more bold changes that we'll make in the months and the next year to come. So.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Gilman? Councilmember Vanderpool.
I understand that the bus that used to run late to Evergreen was funded by Evergreen, right? Correct. I'm wondering if there's any sort of conversation about either Intercity Transit paying for it or getting the Evergreen back on board now that we're on the other side of the pandemic, because it's really something a lot of students used to use to get to downtown on the weekends.
Yes, we call it Nightline service. And so both going up to the west side, but also coming up Martin Way to the east and going out Capitol Way in the next summer schedule change. We're going to increase the later night runs, hoping to get everywhere to 11 and Evergreen later than that running. So yes, Nightline is a priority for service restoration.
Councilmember Vanderpool.
Yeah, I don't have an extensive amount to report on. The Transportation Policy Board met, and we agreed to move forward on looking at our trails for our focus for the funding, which is where I'm glad we're already at. It seems to be there seems to be a bit of a conflict as to where we want to fund larger projects. Trail seems to be the easiest one. And we'll see as the year goes by, as we start to get more subcommittees, where we're going to go with that. On Saturday, I did go to it was called Gen Z Power Up. It was a thing I was invited to, and I got to speak with some younger high schoolers in the area. And I had, I said, they were talking about how do we get involved, this and that. And I said, I raised my hand. I said, well, we have a youth council we're starting to develop. And a couple of them, I got their email, emailed them back. I said, can I get your email? And they gave me a look like, email, what are you? Anyway, so hopefully I've spread the word of interest, and there was like all of the students afterwards were very interested in being involved. So there's a little bit more to that. Yeah, so that's about it. I'm going to a conference the rest of the week, so I will come back with a lot more. So.
Questions for Councilmember Vanderpool? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Just a comment. Thank you, because as soon as I heard you kind of starting to say that you went to this event with young people, I was like, "Did you talk about the youth council?"
Yeah.
So thanks for plugging that. Yeah, I often have to help my Gen Z sister compose emails constantly. And she has to tell me not to text in email format constantly. So I guess it goes both ways. But we actually have an Instagram and a little bit more newer innovations for that. And so we'll have to share that out with the council and make sure, because I actually have heard from quite a few council members and others that like, oh yeah, I was somewhere and young people wanted to get involved. And so that would be a good thing to share with you all. But anyways, thanks for plugging the youth council. I see Susan, assistant to the city manager, just beaming. She's our staff lead on that. 2 thumbs up. I don't think I've ever seen Susan do that before. Yeah.
All right. Oh, and by the way, for the record, the boat that I chose was called the Jaima. So shout out to the owners, Jim and Jaima Smith. Congratulations on your award. City Manager Bernie, take us home. Or not.
Kind of home. We got a little bit extra time tonight, but thank you, Mayor Payne. Just 2 items for you tonight. One is this week is National Police Week. It's a time to both recognize the contributions of law enforcement in our community and also in remembrance of those lost in the line of duty. So you'll see the OPD flag flying above City Hall this week in honor of them. Tomorrow morning, I'll be joining them. They have their annual awards ceremony in the morning, so I'll be joining them up at the Capitol for that event in the AM. And so just wanted to thank our law enforcement employees across the city for the work that they do for us every day. And second, about a year ago or so, I had this crazy idea that I talked to Kelly about to start a podcast as a way to highlight our priority work and broaden out our communication about the things we're doing at the City of Olympia, a way to kind of help set the record straight on questions that we get that are hard to deal with in lots of different formats. And so we've spent about a year planning this and engaging the community about the types of things they're interested in. And this week we launched our first episode. So out on Spotify and YouTube and everywhere that you can find a podcast. If you look up and search for Actually Olympia, you'll find our City of Olympia podcast. And episode 1, my guest and for Kelly and I was Darian Lightfoot, our Director of Housing and Homeless Services. And Darian just did an amazing job of talking about the ecosystem of things that we're doing around housing, not just those that are houseless, but how we're trying to keep people in housing, how we're trying to attract housing to our community. And just a really great discussion that highlights a lot of the work and how all those pieces fit together and why, one, they all have to go at the same time and you can't work on one without working out the other. So it's a really good listen. First episode's out. I'll just tease the second episode. We're going to invite Mike Reed in and we're going to start to talk about Olympia Strong and what that work looks like. And then we'll go on there. The idea is to have a new one every month. And then starting with our next episode, we're going to dip into the mailbag of questions that we're getting through Engage Olympia, of things that people want to know that they are looking for answers on. So really excited to launch that as a new piece for our community. So I hope people will enjoy it.
That's exciting. Looking forward to listening to all of the episodes. And I like the way you described that. We really do have a housing ecosystem in our community. With that, that concludes council reports. So council will recess for 5 minutes, after which we will convene for an executive session pursuant to a real estate matter and potential litigation. No decisions will be made. The council will meet in room 423 for up to 90 minutes, after which we will be adjourned for the evening.